Welcome to Acorn to Oak with Pennie Quaile-Pearce and co-host Matthew Donnachie. Within each acorn, there is the DNA that strives to be a mighty oak tree. All it needs to reach its potential for greatness is to be activated. You are the acorn. On this show, we will share with you the tools and guidance you need to grow into the person you are meant to be. And now your host, Pennie Quaile-Pearce and co-host Matthew Donnachie.
Hi, good evening. It's Pennie and welcome to the show. We were having a couple of technical problems just before we came on air, so hopefully they're all sorted out now and you'll be able to hear myself and Matthew with no problem whatsoever. So this evening's show, what is it all about? We're going to talk about enlightenment and what does enlightenment actually feel like? You know, it's a question that people have asked for thousands of years, and it's part of human nature to want to know what the meaning of life is, and, you know, or to feel connected with something that's much greater than themselves. You know, Buddhists view enlightenment as higher consciousness, a state of being that is perfect in knowledge and wisdom. It's a state where, you know, you're aware of and have compassion for every living thing in existence. They believe that when you achieve enlightenment, you stop being reborn because you've learnt all the lessons you need to know. But when we look at Christianity, there's a lot of debate around the meaning of enlightenment. In the Gospel of St. John, he speaks about the light and love of Jesus, as some Christians believe that that is the example to follow. What do you believe? You know, this is one of the biggest questions I think that any thinking person will be thinking of on different occasions, not necessarily every day. But I just wanted to hand over to Matthew so that Matthew can give you his take on it. Okay, so hopefully Matthew will answer.
Hi Pennie, good evening everybody. Yeah, it might be a slight delay. Technology, don't you just love it? It tests us again and again. But yeah, very much, it's really interesting subject, because for me, when obviously we were talking about what we were going to speak about, and when it initially came back it was going to be enlightenment, it was very much looking into, well, what does that mean for me, and what was my thoughts on it before I did sort of spiritual work and that sort of thing. And it was very misunderstood, I think, as a subject, and there's sort of lots of people talk about enlightenment, but it is very much what it means to you. What it personally means for me is when I sort of was going through a spiritual awakening and an enlightenment of sorts. It was realising and really connecting with what's true. And I very much did that through feelings. So in meditation and obviously using breath work, it's like you can't cheat your feelings, so you know when it's genuine. And for me, when I started getting feelings in meditation, it was just a huge connection to life and what truly really matters. And I think it's the thing that's really helped me keep positive through coronavirus, because I very much see it as I see life from the bigger picture. So not necessarily the chaos that we see in front of our eyes, but the huge changes that are coming from these situations that have changed life forever as we know it, which is an amazing thing. But I think having that sort of spiritual view and that feeling of connection to something so much bigger than I ever felt before, that for me is what sort of carried me through. And when I was younger and people spoke about religions and enlightenment in that way, it was I never really it never really resonated with me. Religion never really resonated when I looked at some people's behaviours that were religious. There was some incongruencies, and never really sort of understood it. So for me, it's about a personal connection, or getting to a personal stage where you have that feeling and connection with the universe.
I think it's as I said, it's a fascinating subject, and I could talk around it and discuss it for days, weeks, not just an hour. And I think, and that's the thing really, and because everybody will have their own personal experience of the bigger picture. And obviously we're talking about the biggest picture right here, right now, where, your whole consciousness is within the divine, or within God, or within however you want to describe it, really. And therefore it takes us way, way beyond ourselves. And, when you chunk things up to that degree, you look at it and realise that, there's only one source that could have delivered a pandemic the way that it was delivered. And that is, it's coming from the divine. And therefore, if it's coming from the divine, what are the lessons and what are the wake-up calls that he is asking us to notice, or the force? I'm sorry, I'm calling it he, so it's Father God. But you look at it and going, well, what are the lessons here that he is trying to get us to see? And very much, it's a wake-up call to actually say, how we were doing life before the coronavirus was not really working. And there were some real areas that needed to be looked at, and for us to address as, the global family of humanity. And when you actually see now, coming towards the end of the threat of the coronaviruses, we've been thrown so many different challenges. Obviously the challenge of racism, and, Black Lives Matter, and people taking to the streets, and definitely in America, and also to a degree in the UK, actually saying that this is not okay anymore, and brutality and people picking on small minorities is not all right anymore, and we need to look at it and address it. And it's, obviously in the UK, as I also know in America, you've had people attacking statues of people who were involved in the slave trade, and this and that and the other, and you just look at it and go, here is the consciousness rising. We're all being asked to step up to the plate and examine who we are on an internal level. And when you actually look at it from that, only one source could put down a directive like that, and it is the divine, whatever the divine means to you. And it is great to start to see that people are beginning to say, no, kindness. What's the matter with being kind to other people? What's the matter with about helping out other people? And people have, there's some great stories and heroes who've come out of, this pandemic. And it's just really, more than anything else, asking us to be our own heroes, of actually using our voices, because we've been so distracted with all sorts of different things that have gone on. And it's actually asking us to go within and then find that spark of enlightenment within us and nurture it and bring it forth. and therefore looking at the world as a global family. There is no separation now, although of course we've got this social distancing, but there is no separation. Everybody on the planet is an aspect of me, and everybody, and I'm, an aspect of them. And there is no separateness. One of the things that, when we incarnate, we separate out into individual souls, but we're all part of the same thing. So when we actually start looking at enlightenment and we start looking at this is the journey home, the journey in spirit to actually become part of the whole again. And when you look at different saints and you look at different gurus on the planet, whether they're in form or out of form, they all talk about Christ consciousness. And even the Buddhists and the Hindus will talk about Christ consciousness. And so actually looking at that great leader of the 2,000 years ago, of somebody who actually could love his enemies and actually forgive, and some of the Christ-like qualities, this, if you use that as a roadmap, it's beginning to get those qualities within self, so that you will be able to raise your vibration and actually be able to directly contact that well of wisdom and knowledge and love, and realise that that's what they're asking us to do if we're actually on the path to enlightenment. And sometimes when you actually hit an incredibly blissful state, you do get glimpses of that type of consciousness, and it's awe-inspiring, absolutely awe-inspiring, and so totally where you're at peace and your soul sings and you realise that, whoa, I would like a little bit more of that. So again, handing over to Matthew, because I can feel him going, I want to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so funny because, my spiritual sort of wake up and journey has very much been with Pennie. And that's what I think is really nice, to be able to put my perspective across, is that when I was learning about spirituality, I had all these sort of judgments and stigmas around, oh my God, I'm going to have to change and be a totally new person. And it was so far from the truth. It is literally just, life is just different. You don't change as a person. If you've got some bad habits, yes, they're going to have to change. But ultimately, some of the fear for me around exploring it, even though I had a bit of an awakening and a sense of spirit, was what does it mean? It was the fear around not knowing what it meant, and some of the people that you see walking around that you assume are spiritual and perhaps aren't as spiritual as you may think they are, sort of thing. But with a good guide and information from Pennie, it was very much, Pennie would talk about the feeling you get in a meditation should be almost like energetically orgasmic, and I never really understood it until it happened, and it was just like amazing. It was like 100% connection. It's almost like I would say like an all-knowing consciousness. It's, you don't know that you know everything, but you know everything in that moment. It just such a profound moment when I think I hit it for the first time. And it really, I think what helped with me was the meditation, the daily practice, is the thing I think out of everything is the thing that really helps you connect on that daily basis into what's real. Because ultimately, a lot of what we see on the outside and some of the experiences that we have are not real, and we can be sort of dragged and sort of deluded by what's going on rather than concentrating on what's going on the inside and making sure that that's running well. And I think when you gain that, it just gives. I mean, personally, it's given me such a passion to help others. Even though in my old career, I people would say, "Oh, but you are helping others. You're creating amazing houses and spaces for people." And it's kind of like, well, yeah, that is amazing, but I wouldn't change what I do now because I get to literally guide people, like Penny has for me, guide people through the bits that they don't want to look at, and that's the bits that are going to make the most change. So for me, I think the meditation was such a great tool in just keeping that connection and just getting to know self, but also what's outside of self. And the expression Penny always used to use is, don't believe a word I say, go and test it. Test it for yourself. And it is that when you're given that clear guidance, it's like it just helps you to feel it even more for yourself, because you realise that you're not being misguided or anything like that, and that just makes it even more profound. It's like finding the truth. And as I said before, for me, religion never really made sense because it was kind of, there was so much conflict, and whether it be belief or colour or race or whatever it is, it's like there's always a conflict, and there's never this peace that everybody spoke about. And this is just my thoughts as a young child, so it never had that congruency within me, because I thought, well, surely if they're all talking, if all the religions are talking about God, then they're all talking about the same thing. But if you ask different religions, they would say they're talking about different gods and different things. And it's kind of, my judgment on it was, well, it's almost like a book was written in each country about how we should live life, which is be good to each other, love yourself, love your family, all be on the same page. It is almost like the Ten Commandments written across the world. But because man's picked up a story and made it his own, that's where the incongruencies come in, because someone will say, well, my God's one colour, and someone will say, well, no, he's not, he's another colour. And someone will say, well, no, he sits on a cloud and he's got a big fluffy white beard. So automatically you've got this, well, we're talking about something completely different, so you're different from me and I'm different from you. And my thought was, well, they're all talking about the same thing. They just can't agree on the fact that they're talking about the same thing, which to me was crazy. So I thought, well, spirituality fits because it's an all-inclusive club. Everybody's welcome, and nobody is sort of not welcome. So it's how it should be for me. It kind of, that's when it sort of chink, chink, chink. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And I understood then how people within religions can have the faith that they do, and almost respected them more because I didn't believe in it before, but then had my values and respected my values just as much as everything else. So it really did open me up on lots of different levels into seeing things from a totally different view, because from my experience in childhood and ignoring that side of things in my sort of 20s and then hitting it in my 30s and sort of re-evaluating everything, it was just such everything suddenly makes sense. And you don't have to believe in what I believe in, you don't have to believe in what Penny believes in. It's whatever makes sense to you at that time.
And it will change.
As time goes by, more does make sense. So...
Yeah, as I was saying, as time goes on, you will refine your own ideas, But what helps you refine your own ideas are the experiences that you actually have, or the things that you may read, or the things that you may be shown. And it's, I think, really important to, as Matthew's been saying, is, yes, enlightenment, when we're talking about spiritual enlightenment, there are obviously some well-documented cases of saints and gurus who have been enlightened, and there are different terms of enlightenment. You may have a small experience of higher consciousness, or you may actually be able to walk around in a blissful state a lot of the time, which is exactly what I'm heading for, or I hope to gain in this life. But sometimes it's in and out. And, obviously I can hear the music coming up, so we're coming up for a break, and we'll be talking about this in more depth when we come back.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs, and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
We are talking about your life. Ever wonder, is this as good as it gets? No, it could be so much better. At Acorn to Oak, we know you are seeking more happiness, joy, unconditional love, financial freedom, passion, and purpose. Find your unique mojo and live an extraordinary life. Want to know more? Contact us at our website, acorntooak.org.uk.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
So we're talking about enlightenment, which is one of my favourite subjects, and I think one of the things that is really important to get over to you is it's closer than you think. It's not something, as Matthew was saying, it's not a God sitting on a cloud with a white fluffy beard up in the heavens somewhere. It's, the whole point is enlightenment is everywhere. It's above you, it's inside you, it's behind you, it's surrounding you. It is the energy of that actually makes us think that we're separate from other people, but it's not. That is, when people turn around and say, I had this experience where, I felt that my son was in danger, and I could feel him. I could feel his breathing. I could feel that he was obviously in terror or something that was going on, and it made me, think of him. And I, felt very, very connected to him at that moment. And it wasn't until he came home and he said, actually told me, well, I was riding my bike down the road, and a car came out in front of me, and I was I hit the car and I was thrown over the bonnet or whatever it was, and you suddenly realise that the terror you were feeling was his terror. And we forget this. We forget that we are so connected by this energetic field that surrounds us and is above us, below us, in front of us, behind us. And those molecules of energy which are there is the enlightened energy. As I was saying, we just don't realise it at the time. And the entire field of your experience is the field of enlightenment. So if we actually manage to calm ourselves, which is one of the things I was teaching Matthew at one stage of his journey, was just slow down, take a breath, expand those feelings, expand that awareness, and you will start to actually realise what enlightenment is. It is that peace and that grace and that absolute feeling of connection. And when you reach that absolute feeling of connection, it's making sure that you bring in that connection into your physical being as well as your mind, to actually bring in drafts of thirst-quenching spiritual drink, which is what then brings the peace and the contentment. And once you find evidence for that, peace and contentment, like attracts like. If you have that seed within you, then you can bring in more of it and more of it and more of it over time. And this is why, I'm a Kriya yogi. I've been on a spiritual path for 30 years, and I meditate twice a day, and in the morning and in the evening, and it's part of my everyday life. And when you actually do that type of practice, what it allows you to do is to be more connected with who you truly are. And as most religions will actually say, is they look at it and go, it may well be Christianity, so it's the Holy Spirit. Everybody talks about that energy of enlightenment in some way or other. But as Matthew was saying earlier on, it's like everybody's written their own little book, or they've all got a chapter of the same book, but it's just slightly different. And maybe the language and the way they term what they're writing is slightly different, but it's all one. And as spirituality, if you're on a spiritual path, it very much says that on a spiritual path you'll accept there is one God, there's not many gods. There is one God, one source. Yes, that source is Mother, Father God. So it will talk about the masculine side of God and the feminine side of God. But it's not a person. This is not a person sitting on a fluffy cloud. This is an energy. And, for all of those Star Wars fans, the source, or the force, should I say, is actually more in alignment with what is actually going on in the cosmos. Every living thing has a divine spark within it. Therefore, that divine spark, if it's part of the force, in Star Wars terms, then if it's part of the force, that's why you can move things with your mind. You can actually, pick up other people's feelings. You can actually pick up the feelings and the anger of the people who are very upset right here, right now, with the brutality of some of what they term policemen, not necessarily policemen, because that's actually making it a lot smaller than it is. It's the violence within humanity, unfortunately. And if we look at why that violence is going on, it's because people feel that, they haven't been heard, or they haven't been given a good shot, or whatever it is. And when you actually look at it, we can all feel those feelings of hate and, suffering and pain and all of those things, is because we're connected to the same field. We understand, we can actually look at some of the videos and some of the things that have been on the TV, etc., and you just look at it and go, how would I feel if I was in that situation myself? And that's all it's asking us to do, Part of becoming enlightened is to lighten up to what is going on, not just for yourself, but in the bigger picture. So again, I've been chatting, and Matthew may have something that he wants to add. So by all means.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll add is just because I was chomping at the bit to mention it as you were talking about meditation every day and that sort of thing. And it was like, I remember early on, and I'm not sure if I've shared this with Penny, but we used to go away on retreats, and I'd be meditating in the morning and the evening, and life was peachy. We were cooking on gas. It was brilliant. I'd get home, I'd do 2 or 3 days, and then I'd miss one out. And it was just like a realisation around, I'd got used to being in a certain place, being in a certain feeling of flow, and being out of that flow, it was like everything was difficult. It's like there was traffic on the way to work. I was late. It was like materials were late on site, which then put the job back, and then the customer wasn't happy, and then it went on, and it was, I can't remember, I was having a conversation with someone, and it took me a while to get it, that it was the meditation that was really actually improving my daily experience. And at one time I put up a sign on my door, because there was always an excuse. I haven't got enough time, I need to get this done, I need to get that done. Very much as Penny mentioned earlier, it was like she would say to me, just stop, slow down. Like, there's always something to do, isn't there? And you just have to say, no, I'm going to take and it's only 20 minutes out of your morning. But I put a sign on my door, and it was very much, excuse my French, crap day or good day, ? With meditate underneath. So that before I went to walk out the door in the morning, I asked myself the question, well, which day would you like, sir? And every day I started meditating, because I had to make it that clear for myself that was the difference it was making. But yeah, it really does make such a difference, even if you're only sort of meditating for 10 minutes, that will make a huge change to the whole of the rest of your day. And when I got that, it was, that was an enlightenment in itself. It was like, wow, this tool that we all have, and this force that we can connect to, because that's a term that I like to use, is the force. And it is that sort of, that God consciousness sort of thing, that all one. But yeah, I think it's made such a difference in my life, just gaining that connection, and I think it helps you to really see through what's important and what you need to focus on, and what's not important, and what's just a distraction. Because when you're running on your feelings more than your thoughts, you will feel a bigger connection to what's important. So you can be empathetic with a situation, but it doesn't mean that you'll be sympathetic and get really dragged in, and it's going to ruin 3 hours of your day because you can't stop thinking about it. And I think that's, again, some of the energetic tools that we use. It's like you can literally tune in and feel what that person is feeling in the moment, and feel their despair and their anger and their frustration and whatever it is. And if it brings some up within yourself, which inevitably it will do, it's going to strike a chord. It's dealing with your emotional reaction in the moment, so that you can actually get back to the sort of the truth of it, which is that yes, certain things are going to upset us, but we don't have to be dragged off course. And when you have that focus on what's really important and where you're going and what's going on around you, I think that, again, like I said earlier, that's what's helped me through coronavirus, because while a lot of people have been falling apart, a lot of the people I've been talking to is like, oh, it's so refreshing to talk to someone that's positive and somebody that talks about the bigger picture and the fantastic things that are happening and the changes that you can see happening and this, that and the other, because I know it's not just me, but it's felt like it in the last few weeks, because I seem to be having this amazing experience and helping others to see that actually there are huge changes going on in front of you, but you're just looking the wrong way. You just need to almost look the other way and see what's going on, because there's a completely different world. And I think, again, that's what it brings, that when you really have that connection. And to some people it may not be that you feel it's a spiritual connection. It could just be a huge connection to nature, as I know a lot of people feel that huge connection to nature, but say it isn't necessarily a spiritual thing. It really doesn't matter what it is for you. It's just following what feels right for you.
I think that's why, for me, it was important to actually say that, enlightenment, again, is not something that's really far off. It's in front of you, it's behind you, it's below you, above you, it's everywhere. And it is just beyond your bodysuit. We're spiritual beings, and we say, no, don't do that. And make sure you take your hand out of the fire before your physical body is damaged. So when people turn around to me and say, oh, what, right, okay, so at Acorns Work you do some ego training, so you want to get rid of your ego? And I go, no, you don't want to get rid of your ego, because if you get rid of your ego, then you get rid of your physical bodysuit. And therefore you won't be on planet anymore. You'll be in spirit again. Well, that's not a bad thing at all. It's just, if you're enjoying your physicality, you want to actually stay here for as long as you can to, progress down the lessons that you need to learn in this lifetime, so that you can stop the reincarnation wheel. But it's very important to realise that getting rid of your ego is not what becoming enlightened is. What it is actually.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What Is Going On. My passion is sifting through information, research and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, Why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
We are talking about your life. Ever wonder, is this as good as it gets? No, it could be so much better. At Acorn to Oak, we know you are seeking more happiness, joy, unconditional love, financial freedom, passion, and purpose. Find your unique mojo and live an extraordinary life. Want to know more? Contact us at our website, acorntooak.org.uk.
Long ago, you wouldn't think of galloping on a horse while doing calligraphy, and you wouldn't have attempted to ride your bike while typing a letter. Yet you think you can safely operate a multi-ton vehicle while texting? Behind the wheel is no place to multitask. If you want to BRB, drive now and text later. Lives depend on it.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
So it sounds like we've been having a few technical problems. It's always the way, isn't it? So of course I shared all the secrets to enlightenment whilst you couldn't hear me. Sorry. It's really important to know that sooner or later the reality of enlightenment will be absolutely 100% obvious to you and undeniable. And it's sometimes when we actually stop seeking it that it arrives. It's like, we prepare the soil and we make sure that the soil has got great nutrients in it, and then we plant the seed. And when we plant the seed for that, there's no good going up to the ground and going, grow, grow, grow. You need to sit back and wait and have inordinate amounts of patience, so that the seedling will grow. And the seedling is bliss. It's the seed of bliss, which will become undeniable in your life. It's when people are just 100% spontaneous, and just, when I look at my son who's 3 years old, and he will just dance or burst out into song, or just be incredibly sure of his oneness with the universe. And when you look at that and you see that in children, you know they are so much more connected to the source than you are, and it is quite astonishing. And for me, very much, I actually said that I would talk a little bit about a near-death experience that I experienced about 4 years ago when I had a stroke. And my husband was very, very sensible at the time. He was by my bedside, but disconnected with me energetically, and just sent me loads of healings and prayer as I made this journey. And it was very much like going into a wormhole, and I could see different apertures going off to the left and the right of my vision field at the time. And I knew that I could go down any of those turnings, but knew that if I did, I would go into pathology, and I would, if I didn't keep on moving through what seemed like a wormhole. And as I moved through that wormhole, it was like I popped out the other end. And that's when I popped out the other end. I knew I was out of body because I could see myself lying in the bed, and was surrounded by beings, beings who were there to help and support me. And I had a conversation with them around, this is not time for me to leave the physical body, I'm going to go back in. But what it actually gave me was everything that I had spent the last 20 years teaching, I realised was the truth. And I had that incredible experience of bliss. And when I did get back into my body, I spent the next 4 or 5 days constantly in that blissful state. And, you know, it was like nothing touched me. Nothing could ever touch me again that would get me off center. And it was a real blessed experience. And, you know I talked, obviously, I eventually opened up and talked to people about that experience. But at the very beginning, people would just basically look at me and say, but Pennie, you're shining. You know, how could you possibly have just been through this incredibly immense trauma and your whole face is just shining with joy? And I went, you know, I actually thanked the medics at that time for the experience that I'd had. So hopefully I'm talking away and you can actually hear me. So I'm just going to check this out and see if Matthew can hear me.
Yeah, loud and clear. And
good.
It's actually one of my favourite stories, because to be a witness to other people's reaction when you tell that story is, they just don't understand how you could say it's an amazing experience. And the reason I say that is because the amount of people that would come up and go, oh Pennie, that must have been such a horrible experience. And the answer was actually no, it was an amazing experience. And it just goes to show when you see somebody that has that connection and that belief and has been through something, that it's just amazing to see people's reaction, because they just, like I said, they assume it's going to be a negative experience. But it's classic Pennie, she'll take any negative experience and turn it into a positive one. And I think that's one of your greatest qualities. Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Excuse me. But again, it's what's helped guide me as well, is it's sort of, don't believe what I say, go and try it for yourself. It's the sort of giving the information and then allowing you to do the work. But yeah, I do love that story. And what's the, please correct me if I'm wrong, what was the quote? There was one I wanted to mention earlier. Was it Paramahansa Yogananda that mentioned, somebody asked about heaven and hell, and their answer was, well, where do you think you are now? Because for me that's always really resonated, because my experience of connecting with what I would call the universe or the force, whatever it is truth, peace, bliss, all the good stuff. And yes, we can feel that here, but it's a choice. And I firmly believe, like, there are people that will, if you ask them, what's your life like, they'll say it's like living in hell. But if you ask me, or Pennie, or some millions that are connected to life, what's life like? It's like living in heaven. Because you see, the bad, negative stuff is interesting, entertaining stuff, and you choose to see the good in everything else. And so that's always really resonated with me, that it's kind of like we're in heaven and hell now, it's just which one you choose to live in. So,
I think that's so true, Matthew, and it's also really, I think, for people to get more than anything else is, you know, some people may ask, well, how do you do this? And I think for me, it's having the mental discipline to actually flip the coin and go, okay, yeah, this is really, you know, quite intense. It's quite an intense experience, but how am I going to see this? And, you know, for me, I would, in my very beginning journey on the spiritual path, I would just say to myself, what would love do here? And keep on saying to myself, what would love do here? And I'm not talking about wishy-washy romantic love. I'm talking about unconditional love. What would love do here? And I would then make a choice of how I was going to behave. And I think, again, it is, for me, the art of reflecting, reflection for me is really important, because I would reflect on every experience that I had and what was good about it, what was not so good about it, and what would I change next time. Because that's how we move forward. That's how we improve our behaviour, and that's how we look at, if we have bad habits or anything else that, again, which is maybe ego-driven, how do you train that ego to become in service to your soul? And it's patience and making sure that ego has treats every now and again. It's not about hair shirts and flogging yourself, It's actually about being compassionate with self and being empathetic, and actually realising that, how did the elephant cross the desert, which is one of my favourites, and I'm sure Matthew will laugh. How did the elephant cross the desert?
Yep.
One step at a time. You cannot expect to, power jump over Everest straight away. Just one step at a time. And, you can choose the valley route, and that's perfectly okay. Or you can go up the steep cliff. You don't have to do it. It's your choice. Just remember that enlightenment surrounds you. It's not in some distant place. It surrounds you. Literally, if you wet your fingertips and you reach out, you can feel it. If you take a breath, you can feel it. It is tangible, and it is just there. And that's, I think, the most important thing, when we talk about how does enlightenment feel, it is that peace. Okay? So, again, I'm making sure that I keep an eye on the clock this time so that we know how many more minutes we've got. So I just want to give Matthew a couple of minutes so that he can put his 2 pennyworth in.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of last thing I'd like to say is really whatever stage you're at, it's just sort of keep going, keep believing in what feels right for you, and don't allow people to misguide you or sort of necessarily. I'm not a huge fan of guided meditations. I think there's some fantastic ones out there, but you can't beat a quiet meditation for me for really getting that connection. I've spoken to a lot of people recently that have mentioned that they only really use guided. So get inside yourself and find that connection.
And we'll see you next week, and hopefully we'll be 100% present and no glitches. Okay, you take care and have a great week.
Take care, everybody.